I am Dina, and welcome to another discussion with Dina. So, there is so much talk today about squatters, illegal squatters, and their squatting rights, squatters' rights. Just hearing that, doesn't it sound odd? Let's see if we can make sense of some of this squatter stuff. Now, I wanted to know what exactly is a squatter. And it is defined as a person or persons that choose to occupy an space, an abandoned space, or what appears to be an unoccupied area of land, a building, a home, etc. Squatting is the name for the action that is done by the squatter. Now, the squatter does not own, does not rent, does not have any lawful permission to be there, but they occupy whatever it is, which completely is different from, and even though it may be confusing, but it is different from what is called tenant rights, because it is just the opposite. Tenants went about the process of legally obtaining rights to whatever land or facility or building or house, whatever it is. So they do deserve a certain amount of rights to cover them for which they have occupied legally. And within, there should be some type of contract of some sort that also would have an agreement in it that would define to them if it is not renewed, or if for some reason there needs to be written within that document at what point does the tenant or renter can be labeled a squatter. So that is something that should be addressed within the contract or the lease or whatever it is that you are obtaining to legally take possession of the property that you are renting or etc. So that should be something that you discuss with people when you are renting or occupying a space that you don't own. But when we refer to squatters, why is the law so complicated today? It's so complicated, and it begs the question, isn't squatting unlawful? And if it is unlawful or against the law, why isn't it deemed that one who squats is violating the law? And why then is it not the law enforcer's right to enforce the law? Sounds simple enough, right? Doesn't it? Yeah, not so much. Let's just take a moment and listen to what this squatter had to say in his invitation to other illegal people like himself that came into the country illegally, what they have to say about squatting. Let's listen to what he's encouraging them to do. Take a listen.
Una casa en United States.
In his most recent controversial TikTok video, Moreno is telling his followers to avoid living on the streets in the United States. They can, quote, invade empty homes and live there, saying under U.S. law, if a house is uninhabited, it can be seized, referring to squatting rights in our country. That video garnered almost 4 million views.
As we have more migrants moving into cities, more homelessness, we are going to see more of it, more squatting.
James Burling is a property rights attorney.
But they're talking about all the advantages that you can get from squatting. It's inevitable that it's going to increase.
In past videos, the illegal migrant bragged that he came to the United States to vacation and now lives off U.S. taxpayers because he had a child in this country.
Again, we have to remember that we are in America. And even though there are laws on the book and in place that govern enforcement of squatters, sometimes the law can be subjective. based on who, whom, what, and how the enforcers of the law chooses to or not to interpret it. If they deem it something worth their time on that particular day, sometimes, according to that person, is they may or may not pursue it. It's just the American way. There always seems to be some kind of loophole left in the law so that it can be changed or exploited when needed. Now, if a person has entered your home uninvited, without your permission, or even under false pretenses, and you call for assistance from law enforcement to have that person removed from your residence or property, why should they have rights to be there? They entered illegally. Now, this to me makes absolutely no sense, but I can say that I understand why they do that. You have to know whom it is that we are often expected to make these laws. I've seen people make one resident leave a house that their names may be on. And I've seen others who have said, well, he or she is on the lease, so I can't make them leave. So it is sometimes based on who it is that comes out in their mood. Sometimes, interesting enough, this normally can be called breaking and entering, because you're breaking and you're entering a property that is not yours. It can also be called trespassing, which is against the law, trespassing on private property, or unlawful entry onto someone else's property. They know it is not theirs. So I think it is handled so mildly because of its historical conception. As with most laws here in America, it can be open to, once again, interpretation, and oftentimes laws have been cleverly written as so to include leeway or room to protect some of the guilty parties involved. We only have to check the history of America itself. Squatters. What an interesting name. It is said to be derived from the verb squat, which means to sit. And this term was used in the 17th century to emphasize those who settled upon new, uncultivated, unutilized land without legal title to be there on it, and without paying the owner for it, without asking permission to be there. So the squatter lives on the property to which they have no legal claim to, they have no legal rights to, and it is also belonging to someone else. They don't even have an agreement with the actual owners. They simply take possession of what does not belong to them, and they refuse to leave. That's what a squatter is. Isn't that interesting food for thought? And it kind of makes you go, isn't that what colonizers do when they come to places? Because when you think about America itself, and I know people like to call that concept critical race facts, because it is in fact what it is. It's not a theory. This land was occupied when foreigners came and decided we're going to squat here. And we're going to occupy this region of earth. Of course, it's already owned and there are people here. So people squatted here. So with this in mind, perhaps it is the underlying reason why squatters are given this leeway, and why this often makes what should be a basic common sense remedy complicated. You see, adverse possession is what it is called when it is that a person or people that have no legal ownership to a place, a property, acquires it via continuous occupation without the consent or the permission of the owner. It is a common practice, and we can even look to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that we see today. I mean, look at the details of that, and just look at what happens when you get a squatter who does not have legal ownership of a property take control of it. something that does not belong to them, something that is not theirs, that is occupied and owned by someone else. They can cause damage, they can cause harm to that property, that land, including permanent harm to the actual owners of the property. So even though they have no rights to it and it doesn't belong to them, a squatter can gain adverse possession of the property through what is called involuntary transfer. And this is customarily why it's become a complicated thing. Okay, so from the outset, squatters' rights, the very concept of it, complicates enforcing or the process of enforcement for some. But truthfully, the architects of these laws were guilty of it themselves, and that's why we face some of the problems today. And it's why in this case, they tend to leave themselves an out within the law. It's just a form of protection from actual enforcement, which is why we have to hire others to constantly reinterpret or defend the law based on various circumstances. And it also explains why we see some law enforcement officers they actually will use their right or take it into their own hands to enforce some of these squatters or force them to leave the property. I've seen that. There are videos on YouTube where it's not complicated for them. But it's only in certain places, under certain circumstances, and with certain regions and people. And it is justified because it's like a code that the programmer has written into software. And it is also why it is relatable when someone speaks of dismantling this system or this software as it is designed and redeveloping a new one altogether. One in which the law is clearly defined, it is clearly administered and enforced equally by all and to all. But of course, that is another subject for another day. But once again, the enforcement of laws are made complicated because different municipalities, states, and or cities are given the right to interpret it according to how they want to. So enforcing squatting can be different in your neck of the woods. But there are some particular places where squatters can actually gain rights to your property. And each state, once again, has its own laws regarding squatting and squatters. Rights, their length of time, which is normally, I think for the United States, 5 to 20 years, and you get squatters' rights. Some people, as soon as you're in there and claim possession, you have squatters' rights. But squatters' rights in the USA means you must simply reside on the property to claim it. And they say you must abide by common laws and doctrine, but you've already broken the law if you're in someone else's place without their permission. And it is said that they must have continuous possession of the land or property. But it's not yours. I know I was reading that in Georgia, if you have a squatter, they gave some tips that you can use if you have a squatter on your property. And I wanted to share some of these tips because they made no sense to me. The first thing you can do is offer the squatter to pay rent. The second thing is give the squatter an eviction notice. The third thing is to call your local sheriff to remove the person from your property if they don't do it on their own. Now, why would you want to rent to a person that is squatting and you're having a problem getting them out of your property to begin with? Most people who do this are just not reasonable, not saying that there's not exception to the rule. That just to me seemed like something that somebody just wrote for the heck of it. I don't think it's something that can be done often because sometimes these people are very hostile. Then they had a list on how to remove squatters in Georgia. The first thing to do is call the sheriff. And then it notes that the sheriff's office may be unable to remove the person from the property if the person taking possession of the property is considered a squatter and not a trespasser. See these little tight ropes and loopholes? And the second thing that's listed is to serve a notice to vacate. The third, start the eviction proceedings. Mind you, all of this is not free. You're paying for it out of your pockets. Now, I do have to note that the state of Georgia introduced House Bill 1017. It is the Georgia Squatter Reform Act. And with it, it would make it very clear in Georgia that squatting is a criminal offense. It's criminal trespassing, making it a police matter, not just a civil court case. It also makes any fake leasing and it's considered a crime as well. Now, under this Squatters Reform Act, people would have to provide valid documentation of their right to occupy whichever property they are in if they are considered to be squatters within 3 business days or face arrest for criminal trespassing. And for those who present documents, they would have their case reviewed within 7 days to establish its legitimacy, which is a good thing because we are constantly hearing about it taking months and sometimes years to try and resolve the matter of getting a squatter off of your property. But let me just interject as I speak about this. There are some slimy, crooked, unsavory landlords out here today. They're just greedy people and they have no concern for the families or individuals who may be trying to find them a decent, affordable place to live. Many of them are only seeking profit. And as we see, a lot of big industry and companies are getting into this business. So we have to be careful when we're crafting these laws that we don't leave, that there are not loopholes there for these slumlords or people to take advantage of actual tenants that are leasing property. So we must keep that in mind. Having said that, all 50 states have squatters' right, but how and when these laws are enforced can vary once again by what state you're in. For example, Delaware, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Maine, and Maryland. If you have lived on a property as a squatter for 20 years, then you have rights to that property. You can claim rights to that property and pay taxes, and you can own somebody else's property. Now, in Louisiana, it requires 30 years. Now, I know that California likes to say that squatting is not legal in its state. However, they give them the person that occupies a property without the owner's consent. They say it is considered trespassing. But here's the kicker. When one occupies your property, they may be able to make a legal claim to it through adverse possession rights. In California, a squatter may be able to file an adverse possession claim after occupying a property for just 5 years. If you're a California property owner and you find out that a squatter is living in your property, they say you need to provide proper notice, file a formal eviction complaint in court, and attend a hearing to lawfully have that person removed. Or you can have your attorney do this. But in these laws, you can't help but notice the contradictions and these little loopholes, once again, that are written into these codes make it difficult to interpret. I mean, you're not legally there, but you have rights even though you came and got this property illegally. It's so confusing. And all of that could easily be avoided by simply removing the technicalities from the law and actually enforcing it by removing squatters. And again, I say a squatter is not the same as a tenant. But the taking of homes and property is not just done by squatters. We like to say that. There are a lot of people that imitate or impersonate real estate people, and they are able to take possession of properties through ads or whatever, and they will bring other people into it and actually have them sign what looks like legitimate leases, knowing that they don't legally own it. It's a finesse, and sometimes the person really thinks that they have signed a legally binding document, but these people have finessed them. And you have to have some consideration for those as well, because it's not that they are legitimately trying to finesse the homeowner, it's that they've been taken advantage of. And that it opens the door to some very costly law, court dates, civil actions. So the legal system is, it has a duty, but we have to be able to enforce squatters without ifs, ands, or buts. However, when we're dealing with people who have been finessed, that opens a whole nother box. But home stealing is so problematic today that it's so common. Even municipalities and homeowners associations, creditors, and medical facilities are all trying to take your home. Everybody wants dibs on what is yours. They have not earned and should not be privy to this. I know in my state, for instance, if you say you own a $300,000 home and you owe $1,200 in property taxes, annual tax that they tax you, and if you are unable to pay it for whatever reason, these people take your home, and it is considered to be legal. And that to me is a big problem. They should not have the right to take your home for such a small amount, but this is legal here. That's something that should be dealt with. And I also saw where a hospital actually took the home of a surviving spouse when the other spouse died after receiving medical treatment. And they took the house away, saying that they owed them medical bills. I think there should be better solutions. People put a lot of time and years and sacrifice into their homes, and it just should not be something that you should easily levy and have the right to take away from them. I think it's wrong. But there are so many big companies out here that are trying to take ownership of homes. They're trying to take it out of the hands of the everyday individual or family. So somebody else, these big businesses, will own and have control of where you live and what you pay. It's like there's a thing to stop people from having a home or ownership. All of these apartments are going up. There are so many communities today where there are nice houses, whole subdivisions, but you can only rent. They don't allow you to purchase. And that should be concerning to all of us, because who are these big businesses that are obtaining the rights to land, to communities and apartments? And how will this affect us all in the future? At this rate, most of the land, homes, and rental units will be controlled by only certain segments of society. And where does that leave the rest of us? I think there's something nefarious going on here. Just a little food for thought. But solutions are very simple when it comes to squatters. Remove some of the unjust laws and bureaucracy, and stop rewarding people who you know are violating what you call the law. Now, I would like to know what you think about this subject. Subscribe and leave me your comments. And I want to thank you for joining me, and I invite you to come back and have another discussion with Dina. Ta-ta.
This concludes your daily discussions with Dina. Join us Monday through Friday at 12:30 p.m. Like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment.